Hello everyone, thank you for joining me, Amber Bach, for my week 2 presentation on 4 authors discussed in chapters 1 through 3 for MPA 545 Conflict Resolution and Labor Negotiations. So just a brief overview, I will be discussing Kurt Levine and his association with field theory, Folger, Poole, and Stepman with their interactional theory, Terrell Northrup and transformational theory, and then G.G. Scott and resolving conflict. The first author I will discuss that caught my eye is Kurt Levine and his field theory on chapter 1, page 5, paragraph 4. So he explained that actions are a product of contextual forces to do some things and to not do other things. And there is a push or pull based on various factors, such as expectations, commitments, and loyalties. So in this little figure I provided, there is essentially a life space which encompasses one's physical and social environment, including where the individual goes, feelings about places and the people they encounter, as well as what they watch on television and the books that they read. And as they are working toward a goal, there is a restraining force which causes tension and a conflict arises. And this essentially changes the individual's behavior. So an example of this would be if there was a group of people that were arguing amongst themselves about a situation, when really it's the outside factors that are affecting it, then they should be focusing on the systemic issues rather than the individuals themselves, because it was the environment that caused the conflict and not the specific individual. The second group of authors that I wanted to discuss pertaining to a specific theory is Joseph Folger, Marshall Scott Poole, and Randall Stepman, and they are attributed to the interactional theory on chapter 1, page 6, paragraph 1. So they said in their article in 1993, people create the situations they perceive, and what they perceive is also influenced by what they do. So our behavior arises from our interactions with others. Pretty self-explanatory interactional theory. So therefore, conflicts are not under either party's control. Behaviors will be reactive and predictive. For example, one party will react to the other party in anticipation of their next move or argument, and their behavior is going to shift according to what they think the other party's motive is or what they believe the next argument is, regardless of whether it is actually fact. It's all about perception. So people's behavior will change based on their perception, not on actual fact. My third author, Terrell Northrup, and she's in the transformational theory group, found on chapter 1, page 9, paragraph 4, discusses that conflict goes through stages, and each stage may require different strategies. So scholars utilizing the transformational theory focus on change and process rather than on why the conflict occurs to begin with. So they're essentially just focusing on, okay, conflict occurs, how do we change it and get past it? So Northrup explains that conflict, like I said, has stages, and she explained 4 different stages. So the first being threat, when someone criticizes your beliefs or actions, essentially anything that makes up one's identity, and then that person becomes defensive, ultimately escalating to the next stage, which would be considered distortion. So this is the response to the threat, often seen as denial. Then this could lead to rigidification, where people identify with those that share similar beliefs and consider them the in-group, and then those who do not share the same beliefs, they consider the out-group. So an example would be if someone were in the office, they all hated one manager, and but then there was a group of people that were indifferent, or they didn't really care, or they maybe even like that manager, so they would essentially have different beliefs on that person and form groups and have conflict, because the in-group may say, oh, well, you should agree with us that this manager is inefficient, they micromanage, and vice versa. The other group will only associate with those that actually like the manager and think that they're doing a pretty good job. And then finally, collusion. So this is the conflict is maintained because parties have institutionalized it and even celebrate it, as the conflict is now part of the group's identity. So just like not all organizations can be led under a universal management style, conflict also cannot be resolved under a universal strategy. It needs to be adjusted accordingly. So if the conflict is currently in the threat stage, the way that it is handled and moved forward from is going to be different than if it's already made it all the way to the top stage of collusion. Obviously, it's going to have to be a stronger strategy in the collusion stage rather than in the threat stage, which is considered the initial stage, not as harsh. So Gigi Scott goes over resolving conflict and addressing the underlying issue. So essentially, needs and wants dictate a person's reaction or lack thereof to a situation. So unless basic needs and wants are identified and dealt with, the conflict will essentially continue along with growing frustrations. And some sources of conflict are values, procedures, communication, interests, data, structure, and relationships. So within an organization, if someone is not communicating efficiently or correctly or in a manner that the other person is able to receive it, then there will be a conflict there that will continue to grow unless that communication is addressed and they're able to adjust and move forward. So those are my 4 authors I decided to go over, or 4 articles that I went over, and here are my references. Thank you so much for watching my presentation. Have a great night.